I really wish I could go back in time and just tell myself where I would end up today. I always thought that success would be given to me through somebody else.
If you were going to start a business, what would it look like? What would you try to provide the world? If you're Eric Taranchinski, the answer to this question is video games.
This is really intense. Oh geez. Oh geez.
And when Eric isn't developing video games, he's teaching other people how to make them.
So this is two animations right here. Running and idle, that's like a blend depending on your speed.
For many years, Eric has been producing games with a wealth of self-taught work, learned from the internet on free software. He enjoys this so much that he even spends hours creating online tutorials for game development so others can do the same. One thing Eric really loves participating in is 48-hour game jams, where game developers challenge themselves to produce an entire video game in just 48 hours.
Mark, cassette, game develop.
It's a grueling and marveling process. This is where Eric creates his first iteration of Ant Simulator. A pretty simple concept. You roam around as an ant.
Oh, it's a giant ant.
It was a neat little project and got Eric's friends Devin and Tyler very excited. So much so that they wanted to join Eric's team. Eric had known them for several years, so he agreed to sign them on to his LLC. Some of us might have grand ideas about what a business empire might be. However, it's not always fun to plan out each and every step it takes to get there. The day-to-day operations are not as exciting, but they help us to answer important questions, like what part of our budget should realistically be spent on strippers?
Ant Simulator was due to come out available to gamers, but it has since been canceled.
There's no more Ant Simulator.
Bars, restaurants, booze, and strippers.
And they put it on beers, food, and strippers.
So Eric is working on his game development tutorials and Ant Simulator at the same time. Things are looking pretty good. He sounds really enthusiastic to talk about the game's features.
And then once those eggs hatch, we can feed it that piece of apple that I've saved up, and we can get a worker that will help us gather more food.
People start taking interest, and so is the media. While Eric is working, Devin and Tyler are networking. They go to conferences like GDC and set up a makeshift office in Devin's mother's basement. Around this time, Devin and Tyler are pushing Eric to create some sort of playable demo. Now, it's unclear whether the three of them had discussed operating cost, but from what I gather, there seems to be a miscommunication here. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Eric posts this video onto his YouTube, where he says he's going to be leaving the company.
I recently found out that my ex-business partners, they had secretly spent the overwhelming majority of both our Kickstarter money and the Ant Simulator investment money on liquor, restaurants, bars, and even strippers.
The media picks up on this and they just go berserk with the tagline of strippers and liquor.
I hope they had a good time.
Yeah, sure. I mean, meetings were great.
Yeah.
Alright, so let's talk about some common misconceptions with this story. First is drugs and prostitutes.
There was probably blow, right? I mean, why stop at strippers and booze?
And different kinds of blows. Flip the bird to everybody in epic style. With hookers. I mean strippers. They're the same thing.
You don't know. You don't know that they weren't also hookers.
That's good. They could be stripper hookers.
I mean,
What the fuck is happening right now?
Some media mention more illegal uses of the funds, but there's absolutely no evidence to suggest that Tyler and Devin made any such purchases. 2. It was a Kickstarter project.
The game was kickstarted. It was actually on Kickstarter, had a successful Kickstarter.
Ant Simulator was never on Kickstarter. The money that funded it came from the three of them and a handful of donations on their webpage. Which brings us to the next uncertainty: how much money was actually invested in the game? This is kind of unclear because Ant Simulator was a product of Ititski, the company that Eric, Devin, and Tyler were a part of. The same company that launched a successful Kickstarter for Eric's tutorial videos. There's kind of a lot of financial ambiguity here because now the cash is mixed between these two projects and any of Eric's other projects. It's easier just to look at the company Ititsuki as a whole, and we can estimate that their cash assets are somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000. I hope that this paints the picture that Ititsuki is not even a medium-sized indie developer. They are tiny, like ants. After Eric makes his video, Devin and Tyler do an interview. They say there was never strippers involved and that anything that was spent in a bar or restaurant was very reasonable in nature when you look at any business. Okay, so strippers may or may not have been involved, but they do kind of confirm here that company money was spent in bars and restaurants. We still don't have actual figures on how this money was spent, so the next bit is a little speculative. While it's true that a lot of companies do spoil their employees with lavish dinners and even will compensate them for meals if they go on travel, this is not the kind of company Ititsuki is. They are on a shoestring budget. Even just a $100 dinner is going to be a huge hit into their assets. This is where I think the divide comes from. Devin, Tyler, and Eric have big differences on how they view their company. Another claim that I wanted to mention in this video is that in their interview, Devin and Tyler suspected Eric of trying to take all the gains of Ant Simulator for himself. They say Eric took control of bank accounts, social media accounts, and their website. We don't really know if this is true either, much like the claim that the company money was being spent on strippers. However, if it was Eric's intent to cut Tyler and Devin out of the business, you'd think he'd have a better plan than this one. Remember that by leaving the company, Eric is not just giving up on Ant Simulator, he's giving up on all of his work at Ititsuki. That includes his tutorial series and some of his other smaller projects. There is no doubt that he is departing from at least a year's worth of work. Devin and Tyler go on to make some other claims in there too, like that there was 9 or 10 people working on the project and a key aspect of the business was to pay people.
Thank you, Captain Obvious.
Right, I mean, if you have 10 people to pay on a $10,000 budget, maybe it's best you hold off the dinners, restaurants, bars, until after you make the game. Devin and Tyler said that they planned on pursuing legal action, but after this incident, I've hardly seen any mention of them. They had an unfinished game, and with little development experience between the two of them, the project will probably never be seen again. And all we have left is this short demo that Eric made in 48 hours. You know, Devin and Tyler could just watch Eric's tutorial series on how to make games and try to salvage it, but I, for one, am not holding out any hopes. As for Eric Taranchinski, he started a new company, Master Indie, where he still makes games to this day. He found a lot of enjoyment working on VR games and has released several titles, including Swordmaster and most recently, Jet Island, both to positive reviews. Despite this big setback, Eric still pursued video game development, teaching people about his journey as a creator, and continues to promote free software. We might never know what the Ant Simulator money was really used on. The finite details of what really drove these friends apart at this point is mostly based on rumor and speculation. It's possible that some of the company money was spent on exotic business dancers. It's possible that Eric was trying to push Devin and Tyler out of the company. It's pretty likely that a lot more was going on than was ever said in the news. Digging into the minutiae of business is often messy. It's not as exciting as the real reason you started the business in the first place. A dream. A desire to establish. We won't know everything about this story, but I do know this. Eric Taranchinski really does love making video games.
So yeah, I guess it's kind of come back to the beginning. I'm just making fun stuff on the computer, just having fun writing code. It's cool. Nobody else needs to give success to me. Like, it's not gonna come from other people. It comes from within. And yeah, I was feeling depressed and desperate. And that is when I made the worst mistake of my life. I had nothing to lose, but signing that LLC agreement meant that anything I gained after that point, I would then have to lose. So yeah, it was a terrible situation, and I didn't realize that until, I don't know, 2 years after I signed that stupid piece of paper. That is a major, major risk when you team up with other people, is that you might find out 2 years later that they were absolutely the wrong people to team up with. And then at that point, you have to just abandon everything. And that really sucked. So I had to abandon the game and start over. God, that was the most depressing part of my life. Like, I just felt like such a failure. Like I had lost everything. And I felt like I was completely alone. I guess at that point, I was like determined. I was like, I have to make this happen. Like, I've lost everything. I have to make a comeback. And I have to do it on my own.
If you won all the money, what would you do with it?
Bunch of hookers and cocaine.